Welcome, Lisa Taddeo. And you have written in Swedish, tre kvinnor. And you love the cover, you just told me, the Swedish one.
It's my favorite, but don't tell anybody I said that.
But it's really interesting because this book has already been called a feministic classic. And you spent 8 years traveling around interviewing women about their sex lives and lives in general. Mm-hmm. But I would start with something else because I am interested in your mother. The book starts with your mother when she was young and she was very beautiful. Can you tell us about who was following her every day?
So she was living in Bologna, and she was going to work. In the morning she would walk to work, which was a fruit and vegetable stand. And it was maybe I think a 20, 30-minute walk. And she noticed one day that there was someone following behind her. And when she turned around, it was an older man who was masturbating behind her. And after a couple of days, she realized he was doing it every day. And at first, sometimes it was just in the morning, and then it began to be morning and evening.
And you've been, she told you about this?
She told me...
This was Italy, let's say.
Yes,
Bologna,
yes.
She told you about this?
She told me kind of in passing when I was a little bit older. And my mother said a lot of things in passing that for other people might have been bigger deals, and she would just sort of say it and then not describe it. So then I asked, when I was writing the book, I asked my aunt, her sister, and she told me the whole story. And my brother, too, who is 15 years older than me. But my mom had passed away by the time I started writing the book, so I couldn't ask her. And I couldn't ask her why she had said it in passing and not like with a little bit more import.
And why she went the same way every day and probably didn't tell anybody about it.
I'm not sure if she went the same way because there was no other way. Or it was the quickest way, because a lot of times when it was the 1960s, she was probably just trying to get to work as fast as she could. And she didn't tell anyone. And I think it's because, and I've done the same thing in my life in much different ways, not with that sort of a situation, but I haven't wanted to upset men in a sense, or make them think I didn't like them. For example, one time I was on a plane ride from the US to Singapore, which is a very long plane ride. And there was a man sitting next to me. And I'll never forget, all I wanted to do was read my book and go to sleep and not be bothered. And he just wouldn't stop talking to me for all those hours. And I never said to him, sometimes I pretended to fall asleep, like when he turned around, but I never said to him that I didn't want to talk to him because I was afraid of offending him.
So is this what you think about your mother as well?
Yes, I do.
Even what he did? Or did she feel like she was attractive?
No, she definitely wouldn't have felt she was attracted to him. I just don't think that I don't think it meant that much to her as much as it would mean to present day women. I think we have a lot of, with Me Too, et cetera, in the US at least, we're talking a lot about what we don't want, but we're not really talking about what we do want. And so I think back then it was even worse because we weren't talking about what we didn't want, in a sense that if you told somebody, like my brother said to me, that if she had told a police officer, he would have said something like, it's a miracle that he can still do that at his age, because he was an older man. So I think that that's a very likely situation. When I go back to Italy, I still see those traditional ways. I don't think, and certainly in the 1960s, I can't imagine it having been better.
And I laughed when you said that, which is also strange.
Yeah.
Because there was something really, terrible for her to experience that every day.
Yeah.
You have interviewed so many, I don't know how many, but hundreds of women, and some of them have been telling you things that they wouldn't tell anybody else. What surprised you the most?
It surprised me that women were telling me these stories of themselves. It surprised me that they told me a couple of stories that I wasn't able to include because they asked me not to afterwards. Not these women, but other women. A lot of things surprised me. There was a young man who I was profiling, who I was thinking might be. He was in one of the first drafts of the book because it wasn't always 3 women. Although I really like the title, so I wonder, what it would have sounded like if it was 15 men and 7 women. But this young man lived in the same town as Sloane, who's the woman whose husband likes to watch her have sex with other men in front of him. And I was talking to him at the same time that I was talking to her, and he was sleeping with a different tourist, because it was a tourist town, every night of the summer season. And he had a girlfriend, and he was eventually caught by her having sex on the beach with her best friend.
So what do you think?
What do I think about him?
Yeah, because if we talk about your mother, you have been thinking about how women have accepted things that we shouldn't do.
Why the girlfriend accepted that? Well, I don't think she knew until the day that she saw him doing that.
Let's say that there's Lena and Maggie and Sloane. 3 women, but behind that is hundreds of interviews with a lot of women. What surprised you the most?
It surprised me how much judgment there was by women of other women. I think that you don't see that as much because a lot of women don't want to be honest and say that that they think another woman is doing something wrong. And for example, the discussion group that I started in Indiana, the first woman that I started talking to, who ended up being the first woman in the book, Lena came in and said that her husband didn't want to kiss her on the mouth anymore. He hadn't been intimate with her for nearly a decade. And all the women crowded around her and held her and gave her tissues while she cried. And then the next time she came in and said she was about to embark on a relationship with her high school lover, they all told me at night that they thought that she was a whore.
Why do you think it's like that? Why couldn't they say that to her, that they disagreed, or why did they pretend that they supported her?
Well, they definitely they definitely showed her that they didn't approve in person, but they wouldn't have called her a name in person. And I think it's because a lot of the women in the room were in similar situations with their husbands or their partners. And I think that when another person, specifically another woman, begins to do something just for herself, especially if it's something considered aberrant, like sleeping with somebody who's not your husband, that there's a little bit of jealousy even that someone is having this passionate interlude with another person when they're sort of stuck at home with their making the same dinner every night, or going to work and then coming home and having children that they have to take care of, and having husbands who aren't taking care of them. And for a woman to just go out and do something just for herself that is passionate, I think that other women can often feel jealousy about that.
Oh, threatened.
Exactly, that she might do the same thing with their husbands.
Was it a big difference between what kind of fantasies they had and what the life they lived?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's because, we've been talking so much about what women don't want with the Me Too movement. And I think there's almost been an inverse situation where we're not talking about what we do want, because other women don't want us to do the things that they think inhibit the movement that we're trying to push forward into the world.
So it has been more complicated?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's definitely more complicated with what's going on with women just being comfortable to say you can't do this, you can't do that, but to say this is what I want. I think for centuries we haven't been able to say that. I think that men have been able to say that forever, that even when they cheat on their wives, everybody sort of understands that that's what happened, that that's the way that it goes, because men have such outsized desires that they need to sate them, whereas women aren't supposed to have desire of their own. They're supposed to receive the man's.
Were they aware of this, or did they become aware of this when they were interviewed by you?
Of the hundreds, definitely some of them became aware. These 3, well, specifically the 2 not older, but the 2 women who weren't Maggie, who was a young younger woman, especially she was a high school student when she had the alleged affair with her teacher. But the other two women were very self-aware and very aware of what they wanted. Sloane sometimes had a little bit of difficulty realizing where her husband's desire ended and hers began. But Lena, who is a housewife in Indiana, who comes from a very Catholic traditional background, considering all of that, she was incredibly aware of what she wanted and how she was being thwarted in what she wanted by not just her home life and her parents and her sisters, but by the community around her.
Mm. What happens, do you think, when women live a life that they don't really want to live? Because they have so much desires, so much thoughts about sex that they never experience.
I think that when you're on that proverbial rocking chair, when you're in your, 80s, 90s, hundreds, you are missing that story that you want to tell yourself. And I think that it's damaging, for sure. I'm not saying that I think women should leave their husbands or cheat on their husbands and go out. And it's just more about being honest with what you want, not just to...
Even inside the marriage and the relationship.
And being honest when you're bored also. Because I think that Lena was bored. She told her husband she wanted more. So with that situation, it was a big deal because he heard her. They went to a couples therapist, and the couples therapist said, the way that your husband feels about kissing you on the mouth is the way that you feel about wet wool. So even the couples therapist was saying that she approved of Lena's husband's disdain for being intimate with his wife.
Do you think that's why people are so afraid of telling things? Because it's a big risk they take. They could be a divorce as a solution.
Absolutely. And I also think that it's scary to be rejected. Like Lena went out even with your own partner, it's scary to ask for something. I think that's why a lot of women, and Lena said this to me too, and a lot of women I spoke to said they didn't want to ask in a kind way for something they wanted, like let's say washing the dishes, because they were afraid that their husbands would say no and they would then hate them. So instead, they would ask in a sort of angry way, like, why do you never do the dishes? And that's less threatening to your soul, in a sense, because it's to be angry is, then he can get angry back, as opposed to being like, will you do this for me? And then getting rejected, that is more painful, I think.
Why is it so difficult to talk about sex, do you think?
For me, what I saw is it wasn't that difficult to talk about actual sex, the actual acts. People were rather comfortable with describing things to me. It was more about the feelings behind it and the feelings of unrequited love, the feelings of wanting something you shouldn't want, and the way that you could not have it because you either weren't courageous enough to ask for it, or because other people would
look down on you.
Exactly.
Is it a lot of shame in this?
Yes, I think that, with my book specifically, what I saw happen a lot was there were sort of two camps. There are women who feel incredibly seen by it, who see themselves in all three women, or one, two, or all of them. I've seen myself in all of them. Or they feel heard by that, or they feel like these women are representing something inside of them that they don't either want to remember if it's already happened, or something that's currently in their hearts. And those women feel a sense of shame. And reading something, I think, that really pushes it out to the foreground makes them feel uncomfortable and scared.
Women also send you messages directly after they had sex or done things, and then they haven't. I mean, was that a different thing that they did it so quick? And
well, Lena was the one who did that the most wildly, in a sense, because she would go and have sex with this man, Aiden, her high school lover, and it would be very passionate, and they would have sex in this car, and it was I wrote it explicitly because she would tell me every detail of it. And I would often be waiting at this little winery down the road. And after she was done, she would come and tell me everything. Then we would go back to the river together to take in, so that I could experience the sort of sights and sounds and smells that she had. And so, yes, the fact that she told me these things was shocking to me, but then it gradually began to make sense because she wanted, in a sense, a diary, like a verbal diary and a written diary of the things she was experiencing, because she was so in thrall and in passion and feeling connected to her body for the first real time.
Mm-hmm. What happened with you?
During the writing of the book, I had got married and I had a child, and then I made them move around with me to the point that now when my daughter says I miss her old house, I have to say which one.
Mm-hmm. Did you become more aware of your own sexuality?
Yes, I think I became more aware, if anything, of the small assaults that I had suffered, because I think that we remember our large assaults, our physical assaults, but when it comes to the little ones that add up over time, we don't notice them, even though they have affected us in the way that we walk through the world, and the way that we fear, and the way that we love, and the way that we're afraid to love. And so a lot of those came up for me, and I saw them, and I was able to see them with a more honest light at the way that it affected me.
Could you give an example, what you saw?
Yes. One of them was very sort of one that sticks out in my memory so much, but I didn't think about it too much until I started writing the book. When I was in Puerto Rico with my parents, I was about 12, I think, and we were on the beach outside of our hotel, and I was tired of being with my parents. It was like a very long time of just being with my parents. So I asked if I could take a walk on the beach, and they said, okay, but don't go too far. And I went very far. And I laid down, and I was reading a book, and I laid down on the sand, and I remember I was wearing this little bikini, but for a 12-year-old girl, it wasn't like, it was like a tank top and like a bottoms. Anyway, I fell asleep on the beach, and I woke up to a man licking my neck and shoulder, like a man in his late 40s or whatever he was, I don't remember. And I remember sitting up and being startled and obviously very afraid, and I got up and started to walk away, but I didn't want to scream, even though I was scared. I was afraid of him thinking that of him thinking that I wasn't cool, in a sense. You know what I mean? That sounds insane. But as a 12-year-old girl, I felt that. And I don't know where it came from. I don't know if it came from my mother. I don't know if it came from something else that, had happened prior, because there were a couple of other little things. Being, I think, a 12-year-old, 11-year-old girl, little things happen to us just out in the world, the way that men look at you, even when you're young, when you're much too young, and it affects you.
Interesting. 3 kvinnor, 3 women. Thank you so much for coming here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.